Well, welcome back to Leadership Radio. And we're very excited today to have as our guest a good friend of mine of the last 20 years or so, Philip Wheaton from Langley, BC. Here in Canada, Phil has a background in leadership with the nonprofit sector for, I think you said 35 years, Phil.
Yep.
Currently involved in a chaplaincy role in a care facility. He's also working with a development company as a community liaison.
Right.
So a man of many talents comes to us today, Philip Wheaton. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Kerry. Good to be with you.
This is great. We've been really wanting to do this for a while. Our viewers will remember, I would say 6 weeks to 2 months ago, we did a post on the subject of consensus versus buy-in. And the consensus was I was a little hard on consensus. I think the emphasis maybe got lost a little, that the importance, in my way of thinking, was you've got to have buy-in if you're going to have consensus. And we had our guest give an example of that at the time. But anyways, Phil, you felt that because we were hard on consensus, you felt that a little bit of balance to that view was in order. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the subject.
Well, Kerry, it's good to join you as always, and I've appreciated your friendship now for literally 20 years, and our interactions have always been healthy ones. And I'm glad that I can contribute to this topic, because I would confess to having a split mind on this.
Mm-hmm.
But let me explain that a bit.
Sure.
Going back to the 1980s, two of the most influential and, not surprisingly for me, favorite politicians were Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. And what made their administration significant, at least philosophically speaking, is that they were known as, quote, conviction, unquote, politicians. So they had strong convictions, particularly about economics, but also many other things as well, as you would know.
Sure.
And they were not politicians who were waiting to read the tea leaves, nor to figure out what the latest poll said.
Yes.
They had convictions about many issues. And so they went in front of their parties and then in front of the electorate with their convictions and said, here they are. And to be fair, they did a marvelous job at communicating them and making sure that people knew what they believed. And then they let it rest with that. That conviction was a very healthy thing, both for their administrations and for their parties. Now, we live in a political culture today that does quite the opposite. Let's read what the people want, and then develop our convictions. Excuse me.
Quite different.
It sure is. It sure is. And we see the results of that. I'm sympathetic, very sympathetic to people who speak convictionally about what it is that they believe, and then are prepared to go to the court of public opinion and let that be discerned from there. Now, having said that, working particularly in the sector that I've been in terms of the charitable sector, I have understood and certainly appreciate the fact that consensus can be helpful.
Yes.
But notwithstanding your blistering attack,
consensus will never be the same.
Consensus can be helpful, in bringing people together, but it has to be bound by conviction. And so then gathering people around you who have similar convictions, and then let the process of consensus take the conviction and smooth out the rough places, and then apply it to whatever the situation is. And so it takes much longer, and it can be maddening in the amount of time that it takes to come to a central theme that everybody can get behind. But particularly in the volunteer sector within charitable work, the need to build consensus around convictions is a really important place to go. So I'm not really jumping on what you said earlier. I'm simply qualifying it a bit.
No, I don't feel a strip off my back yet.
That's good.
I think when we first discussed doing a follow-up to this, one of your concerns was the opposite end of the spectrum to consensus being dictatorship, of course.
Yeah, of course. Particularly in the charitable sector. I have seen far too many examples where an individual, particularly if religion is involved,
yes,
where an individual can sense they really sincerely believe that they are divinely appointed, and they have no need to build a group around them to help carry out the common goal. And that's incredibly dangerous. It goes without saying.
yeah,
But it also applies in other areas unrelated to the application of religion.
The other thing is that going into the effort of gaining consensus, some leaders might make the mistake of not going into it with a direction in mind. In other words, just throwing it open for a free-for-all. What are we going to do, people? I think that's very dangerous. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, totally, Gary. I've seen so many examples of where, particularly in the charitable sector, where people, well-meaning people, are involved and they want to do what is right for the organization or for even greater causes, but they don't. I'm trying to be generous here. They don't understand that there needs to be a direction established, and just a little bit of guidance from a good leader says, here's where we want to go. Just a little bit, not overwhelming, but just enough to say, here's the big picture. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. The organizations that get bogged down in this, it's not a very good situation. Consensus can be, for some, it's the ultimate feel good. Everybody's on board. Everybody's singing Kumbaya. It's great.
I like that way of putting it.
But it doesn't create conviction amongst people. And going back to my earlier illustration about those two politicians in the 1980s, they weren't waiting for people to get on board and say, isn't that great? I feel great about this.
Yeah.
They brought out big picture ideas, and people jumped on board and were part of the process of defining, for about a 10-year period, a very clear direction for Western culture.
Well, thanks, Phil. I really appreciate your spending this time with us today and sharing your thoughts from your experience as well as your observations down through a very long career in leadership. So thank you so much. Thanks for your friendship and for your honesty in approaching me on this subject.
My pleasure.